I'll talk a little bit here about Schaeffer Cox. It's a case that I had not been paying a whole lot of attention to over the last couple of years. In passing, I had. And I just didn't know much about the guy. I had seen a little bit about him, and then what I heard and read elsewhere in the net didn't seem all that believable compared to the self-published literature that I had seen. And but apparently he got locked up. He's doing a lot of prison time, some 25 years in prison for conspiracy to go to war against the government. What I have done is common web searches. You can see I'm just taking pictures of computers here, okay? So none of this is really created on my computer. It's all from elsewhere on the net. Over here what we have is YouTube. I just did a search for his name, and then we go through here, and what I find here is a bunch of stuff with him speaking publicly, okay? Pretty basic First Amendment stuff. And when he gets in there, it's pretty long-winded. A lot of these videos are parts of hour and a half, 2-hour long speaking sessions that were broken into 10 minutes each. And for me to address everything he addresses in those would take a while. What I don't see is, a whole lot of gun waving in front of the camera, I'm going to start killing people type talk. I don't see it in his self-published stuff. What I do see is a lot of allegations, a lot of mentioning of some meetings or some discussions that took place within range of surveillance recording equipment. Apparently, obviously, somebody at some of those meetings was a undercover operative of some sort. Some of that points toward another militia group in Alaska, apparently a rival group that was associated with a surplus store called Drop Zone Surplus or Drop Zone Tactical or something like that. Apparently the leaders of the other group had entered into some sort of a cooperation agreement with the FBI to get Schaeffer Cox burned somehow, and had introduced him to some pretty rough characters, including an allegedly former member of the Hells Angels motorcycle gang who, had presented himself to Cox and the Alaska militia as forming an alliance between them and the Hells Angels and providing weapons to seal the deal. I haven't been able to get hold of any Hells Angels or drop that name to see if they would acknowledge he was part of them. I'm guessing they would not. I'm guessing they would not acknowledge that guy as being one of their people, but in that whole world, you never know what you're dealing with, okay? And we see a lot of that on a Sons of Anarchy television show. But generally speaking, Hells Angels would not officially involve themselves in undercover operations. However, it's a little bit intriguing that this guy seemed to be throwing the name of that club around quite a bit in some of the news articles about this. Schaeffer Cox had made no mention in his stuff. He doesn't look like a biker. He doesn't sound like a biker. I don't know exactly how that works, but what it does kind of look like to me is that somebody getting outside of his organization has tried very hard to paint a bad picture of him. Here's a lot of commentary from another website called The Immoral Minority, and it's basically an anti-church group from what I can tell, and they call themselves Immoral Minority because they don't like Jerry Falwell and the Moral Majority, right? And what a lot of these groups are going to do is they, whenever they can get a hold of somebody, especially, and it's kind of ugly what some of these people do, is if somebody's a child, especially adult child of somebody who is a figure in the Christian evangelical movement, of course, if there's anything illegal or any criminality involved, what a lot of the anti-Christian groups will do is just publicize it to the max, and they play it. And I don't think it's really outside of their venue to use what influence they're capable of bringing to bear with law enforcement agencies to create incentives to get somebody convicted of something. Here you can see that this group, this immoral minority group, they apparently they solicit donations for their smear campaigns through PayPal. And if they were a true whistleblower type organization for stuff, obviously they would have gotten the Julian Assange treatment. But here these people are one of the publicity centers for kind of a self-feeding cycle between government, press release, and of course creating jury influence and things like that in cases like this. But one of the things you can do in this website, and a lot of the commentary on the YouTube stuff about Shaeffer Cox, because it goes different ways, what we can do is we can go into some of these things, and we're going to stop this. But obviously Shaeffer Cox was a guy who was accustomed to getting up in front of a lot of people. As I talk about some other things, we're going to wait for the comments to load on this, because it gives you a real picture of what a lot of people would say about him, and it's a tremendous amount of hearsay. Okay, there's a lot of people saying a lot about him. Apparently what happened was, he went to trial. There were other people, co-defendants and people like that, who, what I'm seeing in some of this stuff is, where was it? Yeah, this one right here. A couple of the other people, there was a lot of screaming and yelling with the attorneys. The guys were screaming and yelling that they weren't happy with their attorneys, that they felt they weren't being represented. This is Lonnie and Karen Vernon. When I did another search for, what kind of weapons were involved in a weapon case, I get this from Getty Images. Looks like 5 M16A1s. Interestingly enough, with a bunch of 20-shot magazines. So I'm guessing, maybe somebody had gotten a hold of some surplus somewhere, or it was used as part of the undercover sting operation. Maybe they were old Minuteman weapons that have been buried and then dug up. We don't know, but I have yet to find any pictures of Shaeffer Cox holding any of these weapons or posing with them. There's one picture that's been around a lot. This was apparently his militia group. Now, at some point, somebody was saying something about 3,500 people, 3,500 sympathizers. These guys they don't look to me like they're even in a hootery league on anything. And one of the things that was happening was that Shaeffer Cox had apparently run for, one of the lower offices in Alaska, had some association with Sarah Palin. So a lot of the Democrat activists, people at the Democrat underground forums and all that, were trying really hard to go after him in order to smear Sarah Palin. And what they wanted to do was do the broad brush treatment of trying to wrap more of what they consider to be the fringe right or far right Republicans, associate him with whatever it was Shaeffer Cox could be convicted of with the efforts on that. And so that's one of the reasons why, like when we do a search up here, we get pictures of Sarah Palin. Now, when we do this, I'm noticing, again, we want to go down to comments. A lot of people don't have anything to say about this. One thing that does look like was happening, this was a closed courtroom. And there were not supposed to be any cameras, but you'll see a lot of video where somebody's kind of like over somebody's shoulder. Apparently, Cox supporters had managed to get into the courtroom with cameras and record most of the proceedings. The other guy, where there was a lot of discussion with the attorney or screaming or yelling or something like that, I'm not finding that, although it's probably out there somewhere. Apparently, there were people that cared enough about the situation to go in there. What I'm gathering is from a lot of other stuff, was, you know, there was some ongoing issues with this guy between him and the government. It wasn't something that happened early on. And when we look at that, and I look at a lot of his other speeches and stuff like that, I mean, this guy's obviously getting up in front of people a lot. There were a lot of people that, you know, didn't like what he had to say, but I'm not finding anything that involved a confrontation. I'm not finding anything where somebody was getting up in somebody's face and you're screaming, yelling, pointing fingers, making threats at each other. I'm not finding any of that. What I'm finding is a lot of people were kind of in the background. They wanted to criticize him. They wanted to say a lot about him. There was a lot of hearsay, but again, there's nothing I'm finding of him kind of waving guns around, threatening the camera, you know, that sort of a thing. I'm not finding it. Apparently his original first name was Francis Cox, so if you look him up on the Bureau of Prisons Locator, this is the information you get. And I want to go a little bit into the government's case against him in the next video.